Aslam alaikum, there's a certain kind of heaviness we carry when someone has wronged us, that quiet ache in the chest, that burning sense of betrayal, that voice that whispers, they don't deserve my forgiveness. We've all heard it. We've all felt it, and sometimes holding on to that pain feels like power, like control, but in truth it's not power. It's a prison we build with our own hands, and the key that unlocks it, the one we are most afraid to use, is forgiveness. Forgiveness in Islam is not just a recommendation, it's a spiritual command with immense wisdom behind it. Not because the person who hurt us deserves to be excused, but because we deserve to be free. And freedom only comes when we let go of what we were never meant to carry forever. Forgiveness is not saying, what you did was okay. It's saying, what you did hurt, but I choose not to let it define me. That is courage. That is healing, that is power. Sometimes we think if we forgive, we're letting someone get away with it, that we're weakening justice, but justice and forgiveness are not enemies. Justice is accountability. Forgiveness is mercy, and both can live in the same heart. Islam does not ask us to forget the pain, it asks us to transform it, to turn it into something that purifies rather than poisons, because the longer we carry resentment, the heavier our hearts become. And a heavy heart cannot soar in prayer, in love, or in life. There's something deeply human about wanting to protect ourselves from pain. When someone wounds us, our instinct is to build walls, to say, never again. But those same walls that keep pain out also keep healing out. Forgiveness is the quiet act of opening a door in that wall. It does not mean allowing harm again. It means saying, I no longer need to rehearse this pain. It's turning our hearts from being battlegrounds into places of peace. Not because we are weak, but because we are finally strong enough to stop fighting the wrong war. And sometimes the hardest person to forgive is ourselves, the regrets, the mistakes, the things we said and did when we didn't know better. In Islam, we are taught that the door to forgiveness from our Creator is always open, not just when we've earned it, not just when we've fixed everything, but when we turn back sincerely and say, I was wrong and I want to be better. That act of turning back is beloved. It is welcomed, it is honored. So if the most merciful can forgive us over and over again, why do we hold ourselves hostage to mistakes that are meant to teach us, not torment us? Forgiveness is not a one-time event. It's a journey. Some days we feel at peace, other days the pain resurfaces. That doesn't mean we've failed. It means we're still healing. It means we're human. Islam doesn't expect perfection. It invites sincerity. It asks us to keep showing up, to keep choosing softness over hardness, faith over fear, and mercy over pride. Because every time we choose forgiveness, we are choosing to reflect the attributes of the one who forgives without limit. Letting go does not erase the past, but it gives us a future where our hearts are not shackled by bitterness, a future where we can be fully present in our relationships, our worship, our dreams. When we forgive, we are not doing a favor for the one who hurt us. We are doing a favor for our own soul. We are choosing to be carriers of light, not darkness. And in a world that so often rewards revenge and ego, forgiveness is one of the most rebellious and spiritual things we can do. The truth is, everyone is struggling, everyone is hurting in some way, and sometimes people act from their wounds, not their wisdom. That doesn't excuse their behavior, but it helps us understand that forgiveness is not about them being right. It's about us being ready to let go, to stop drinking the poison of anger and expecting it to heal us. Forgiveness is medicine, bitter at first, but healing in ways we cannot fully explain. When we forgive, we make space for something greater. We allow peace to enter. We allow our hearts to breathe. We stop being defined by the worst things someone else did to us. And we start being defined by the strength it took to let go. That is the essence of true dignity. That is the power of faith, and that is why forgiveness in Islam is not a burden. It is a mercy, a path back to our true selves, a path back to the divine. Forgiveness is often misunderstood. In many people's minds, it seems to represent giving in, letting someone off the hook, or pretending nothing ever happened. But in reality, forgiveness is none of these things. Forgiveness is not a surrender of strength. It is not weakness. It is a conscious and deliberate act that requires more courage than holding on to anger ever could. It is one of the most demanding forms of bravery. It asks us to face the wound, not avoid it. It asks us to soften our hearts when everything inside us is hard. It asks us to rise above, not out of superiority, but out of understanding. And that is why in Islam, forgiveness is not only encouraged, it is honored. Because it reflects a spiritual strength that cannot be taught through words, only through practice. There is a certain kind of dignity in choosing to forgive. It is a kind of dignity that doesn't come from being passive, but from being grounded. The ability to forgive is not about forgetting what someone did. It's about remembering what matters more. It's about recognizing that your peace, your connection to Allah, and your emotional freedom are worth far more than holding onto the pain inflicted by others. When someone hurts you, your first instinct may be to protect yourself, to build up walls, and to stay angry because anger feels powerful. But that power is a mirage. It consumes you slowly and quietly. It feeds itself by taking up space in your heart that was meant for love, for prayer, for reflection. That is why forgiveness is the path to freedom, not just for the one who is forgiven, but for the one who forgives. There is something deeply spiritual about forgiveness. It mirrors the mercy of the one who created us. Every day we fall short. We say things we shouldn't. We act in ways we regret. We make choices that hurt others or distance us from what is right. And yet, Allah continues to forgive us, not because we are perfect, but because He is. That is the model we are taught, that just as we want to be forgiven, we should be willing to forgive. This isn't always easy. In fact, it can be one of the hardest things a person can do, but that difficulty is exactly what makes it so meaningful. It means overcoming our ego. It means choosing love when hate seems justified. It means choosing humility over pride. When you forgive, you're not saying that the harm didn't matter. You're saying that your healing matters more. You're not denying what happened, you're declaring that it doesn't have the power to define you anymore. That kind of strength isn't flashy, it's not loud, but it is transformative. It changes the way you carry yourself. It allows your heart to be soft without being naive. It helps you step into your future without dragging the pain of the past behind you. You start to walk differently. You start to breathe more fully, because the chains of resentment no longer weigh you down. What makes forgiveness even more powerful is that it is a choice. You are not forced into it. It cannot be demanded. It must be given freely or not at all. That voluntary aspect is what gives it its power. It says, I choose to rise above, not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace. This is what transforms forgiveness from something passive into something incredibly active. It is a conscious decision to do the hard thing for the sake of something higher. And in Islam, we are reminded constantly that this act is beloved to Allah, that those who forgive are not weak, they are among the strongest. There's also something freeing about letting go of the idea that we must control the outcome. Forgiveness is not about ensuring that the person who hurt you learns their lesson. It's not about getting an apology. It's not about changing someone else's heart. It's about changing your own, because the truth is, we cannot control how others behave. We cannot guarantee justice in this world, but we can control how we carry the pain. We can decide whether to let it consume us or to release it and make space for healing. That's what makes forgiveness an act of empowerment. It says, I may not be able to change the past, but I will not let it define my future. In this way, forgiveness becomes a form of resistance. It resists bitterness. It resists the lie that healing can only come from someone else's remorse. It resists the idea that we are helpless victims of our past. Instead, it tells a different story, a story where you reclaim your power not by hurting back, but by choosing a higher path. A path of dignity, a path of grace, a path that aligns with the teachings of the Prophet, who forgave those who harmed him, not because they deserved it, but because he understood that mercy is the key to true strength. This does not mean that forgiveness always happens instantly. It is often a process. There may be days when you feel at peace and others when the pain resurfaces. That's okay. Forgiveness doesn't mean you are suddenly healed. It means you are willing to begin. It means you are taking steps toward release, even if those steps are slow, and every one of those steps is valuable. Everyone is a sign that your heart is choosing to stay open, even when closing off would be easier. Forgiveness is also deeply tied to self-compassion. When we practice it, we learn how to be more patient with our own flaws. We begin to understand that just as we are trying our best and often falling short, so are others. This understanding doesn't excuse harmful behavior, but it brings perspective. It reminds us that we're all struggling, all human, all capable of both hurting and healing, and that understanding is what creates room for mercy. There is no true strength without mercy, and there is no mercy without the willingness to forgive. In a world where strength is often confused with dominance or power over others, forgiveness offers a different kind of strength. A strength that does not need to prove itself. A strength that is secure because it knows that what matters most cannot be stolen or damaged by someone else's actions. That strength lives inside each of us. It is the part of us that chooses compassion over retaliation, softness over hardness, and love over hate. That choice is one of the most powerful acts of faith a person can make, because it means trusting that even if you are not repaid in this world, your act of mercy is seen. It is recorded, it is valued, and in that trust you are not just freeing yourself, you are honoring the very essence of what it means to be a believer. Someone who walks through this world with a heart full of mercy, a soul anchored in truth, and a strength that comes not from holding on, but from letting go. Holding on to pain is something many of us have learned to do without even realizing it. It starts as a way to cope, to protect ourselves. Someone wrongs us, and instead of dealing with it fully, we store the hurt deep inside. We replay what happened over and over again in our minds, hoping to make sense of it, hoping to somehow make it right by thinking about it enough. But the truth is that replay only fuels our resentment. It hardens our hearts. It creates a wall between us and healing. And although it may feel like we're staying safe by remembering the wound, what we're really doing is allowing it to stay open. Pain that is not processed becomes poison, and the more we carry it, the more it consumes the parts of us that were meant for love, connection, and peace. There's a strange comfort in holding on to anger. It feels justified. It gives us a sense of control. We convince ourselves that by refusing to forgive, we're somehow protecting our dignity, that letting go would mean the person who hurt us wins. But what really happens is that we become trapped. We chain ourselves to the very memory we want to escape, and that chain doesn't just bind us to the past, it binds us to bitterness. It begins to influence the way we see ourselves, the way we see others, and the way we interact with the world. We become guarded, we become suspicious, we start to expect betrayal because we've normalized the pain. Pain left unchecked becomes the lens through which we experience everything else. It shows up in our relationships. It shows up in our worship. It shows up in the quiet moments when we try to feel peace and can't quite find it. Not because peace isn't available, but because pain has taken its place. Islam calls us to release that pain not because it is insignificant, but because it is significant. Because we matter, our hearts matter, and carrying pain as if it were a shield only keeps us disconnected from the mercy we're all seeking. Letting go of pain is not about pretending that everything is fine. It's not about brushing it under the rug or silencing our grief. It's about honoring the wound while not giving it the final word. It's about saying, yes, this hurt, yes, it was unfair, but I choose to not let it define who I am. And that is a radical kind of healing. Because it takes us out of the victim narrative and brings us back to our agency. We may not have chosen what happened to us, but we can choose how we live with it. That choice makes all the difference. There are times when we think holding on to the memory of pain keeps us strong. That if we forgive or let go, we will forget what we learned. But in reality, we can carry the wisdom without carrying the wound. We can grow stronger not by holding on to the experience in anger, but by reflecting on it with grace. Forgiveness does not erase lessons, it simply releases the need to punish. And in that release, we make space for something more valuable, peace. Pain that isn't transformed is transmitted. We pass it on to the people around us. We respond with sharpness. We hold others at a distance. We become defensive and we call it self. protection, but really it is fear. Fear of being hurt again, fear of being vulnerable, fear of what it would mean to trust after being wounded. And yet, we are not meant to live in fear. We are meant to live with open hearts, rooted in wisdom and guided by mercy. Islam teaches that forgiveness is the door to that kind of living, not just because it is noble, but because it is freeing. When we forgive, we're not giving the person a gift, we're giving ourselves one. We are unclenching our fists. We are breathing again. We are choosing to stop rehearsing the pain like a script that never ends. And that choice brings us back to life. It reconnects us with our faith, with our prayers, and with our purpose. Because as long as we are focused on what they did to us, we are not fully focused on what we are meant to be doing in this world. That focus shift is everything. There's a tenderness that returns when we release pain. It's the tenderness of compassion, the ability to look at someone and not see them through the lens of betrayal, but through the lens of understanding. Again, that doesn't mean we excuse harmful behavior. It means we see the pain behind the behavior and we choose not to replicate it. We choose not to let our hearts become what hurt us. That is the kind of emotional and spiritual maturity that forgiveness cultivates. And in that maturity, we begin to see ourselves differently too, not as victims of other people's actions, but as active participants in our healing. Letting go of pain is also about trust. Trust that justice exists even if we don't see it immediately. Trust that Allah sees what was done and that He will deal with it in the way He knows is best. Trust that if we are sincere in our efforts to forgive and move forward, we will be rewarded not just in this life, but in the next. That trust allows us to stop being judges and start being believers again, to hand over the burden and say, I am not the one who balances the scales, I am the one who seeks peace. That is not weakness. That is the highest form of strength. Some wounds are deep. They take time, and that's okay. Forgiveness doesn't have to be immediate. It has to be intentional. Even if all we can do today is say, I want to let go, even if I don't know how, that is a beginning. That is a powerful step toward healing. Islam never asks us to be perfect in our journey. It asks us to be sincere, and if we are sincere in our desire to forgive, even if it's slow, that effort is seen. That effort is sacred. The pain we carry often begins with someone else's actions, but how long we carry it, and what we allow it to do to our hearts, that becomes our decision. And in that decision lies either our continued suffering or our healing. We deserve to heal, not because the pain didn't matter, but because our peace matters more. Forgiveness is not forgetting, it is remembering differently, it is looking at the same story and choosing to rewrite its ending. An ending not of bitterness, but of renewal, not of hate, but of hope, not of hardness, but of softness that comes from strength. When we choose to let go, we choose to live. We choose to stop surviving and start thriving. We choose to take the pieces of our pain and build something beautiful, and in doing so, we reflect the mercy of the one who has always been ready to forgive us. We reflect His light, we reflect His compassion, and we give others the permission to do the same, not because they earned it, but because we are finally free. Islam speaks to the human heart in a way that transcends time, culture, and language. At the core of its message is not just a call to worship, but a call to wholeness. And one of the most profound paths to that wholeness is forgiveness. It is not only something we extend to others, but something deeply rooted in our own healing and liberation. When the Quran speaks of forgiveness, it doesn't do so from a place of obligation. It speaks from a place of beauty. It presents forgiveness as a choice that transforms the forgiver before it transforms anything else. It is a spiritual tool that allows us to realign ourselves with mercy, humility, and emotional clarity. It is not a transaction, it is a transformation. There's an illusion we carry that justice must always be immediate and visible, that unless we see someone punished, we cannot rest. But Islam teaches us that justice belongs to Allah, that He sees the unseen, hears the unspoken, and accounts for what no one else can. This is why forgiveness becomes not just an act of compassion, but a declaration of faith. It says, I trust that my Lord is sufficient. I trust that I don't need to carry the burden of vengeance because justice is never lost with him. That kind of faith lightens the soul in a way that revenge never can. Because when we let go, we are not excusing the wrongdoing. We are choosing not to be tied to it any longer. Forgiveness in Islam is personal. It is sacred. It is between us and the one who created us. When we forgive someone, we are echoing the divine attribute of Al-Ghafur, the one who forgives endlessly, even when we fall short over and over again. Every time we ask for forgiveness, we are met with the open door of divine mercy. And when we choose to extend that same mercy to others, we are not only pleasing our Lord, but we are also softening the parts of ourselves that pain has hardened. Forgiveness makes space for the heart to breathe again. It removes the bitterness that clouds our spiritual vision and allows us to feel the sweetness of faith. Many times, people assume that if they forgive, they must return to the same relationship, the same level of trust, or even the same dynamic. But Islam does not confuse forgiveness with naivety. You can forgive and still set boundaries. You can forgive and still choose distance. Forgiveness is about releasing the pain, not necessarily restoring what was. It is about refusing to carry the emotional poison that resentment creates, because resentment slowly chips away at the soul. It keeps us rehearsing the harm over and over again until we lose sight of who we really are. Forgiveness interrupts that cycle. It says, I refuse to let your action define my heart. What makes forgiveness such a central theme in Islam is that it is deeply connected to our ultimate purpose. We are here not only to serve but to purify, and purification requires letting go of pride, letting go of rage, letting go of the need to be right all the time. Forgiveness helps us recognize that we are all human, all in need of mercy, all making mistakes along the way. The Prophet taught us that the strong one is not the one who overpowers others, but the one who controls themselves when angry. That strength of spirit is what makes forgiveness powerful. It is not a weakness. It is the ability to say, I choose mercy, even when I could choose retaliation. There is also a kind of freedom that comes with forgiveness that cannot be found anywhere else. It lifts the weight that we carry from old arguments, old wounds, old versions of ourselves that no longer serve us. Islam teaches us not to be people who hold grudges, but people who move through life with light hearts and deep roots. Every time we forgive, we realign with that ideal. We remove a brick from the wall that separates us from others and from our own peace. That wall may have been built to protect us, but it also isolates us. Forgiveness opens the window again, it lets the air in, it reconnects us with the essence of being human. One of the most beautiful things about the Islamic concept of forgiveness is that it is rewarded regardless of the outcome. Even if the person never apologizes, even if the relationship is never repaired, even if you never speak of the hurt again, Allah sees the intention, He sees the struggle, He sees the moment you sat alone and said, this still hurts, but I'm ready to let it go. And that moment, even in silence, is recorded and rewarded. Because Islam does not overlook the effort, it honors the internal battle as much as the external one. This journey of forgiveness is often not a straight path. Some days we feel clear and at peace, other days something triggers the memory and the pain returns. Islam gives us the space for that. It teaches us that it's okay to be in process, that even if the heart hasn't caught up with the mind yet, the sincere effort to forgive is already meaningful. The act of asking Allah for help in forgiving is itself an act of worship. It means we are aware that we need His help to do what is difficult, and that awareness connects us more deeply to Him. The most transformative aspect of forgiveness in Islam is that it turns us into people of mercy. And mercy is not just for others, it's also for ourselves. Sometimes we're hardest on ourselves for things we cannot change. We carry guilt long after we've made amends. We beat ourselves up for not knowing better. But the door to forgiveness is always open, and walking through that door starts with accepting that we are allowed to heal, we are allowed to begin again, we are allowed to be loved by the one who created us, no matter how flawed we are. That truth changes everything. When forgiveness becomes a habit, life becomes lighter. We learn to move through the world with hearts that are not constantly weighed down by old pain. We learn that it is possible to be both honest and kind, to remember and still move on, to acknowledge harm and still choose compassion. That balance is where spiritual maturity grows, and that balance is what Islam teaches with every verse that reminds us of divine forgiveness. It is a constant invitation to return to grace. Forgiveness, then, is not just an act we offer to others. It is a gift we offer to ourselves, a decision to no longer let the past hold us hostage, a decision to walk in the light, even if the journey began in the dark. And in that walk, step by step, we reflect the one who forgives all and loves us still. To forgive is to make one of the most profound choices a human being can ever make. It is the decision to value inner peace more than the satisfaction of resentment. It is not about forgetting what happened or pretending it did not hurt. Forgiveness is about looking pain in the eye and saying, "You will not control me." It is a quiet, powerful turning point where we choose mercy over resentment and peace over pride. In the teachings of Islam, forgiveness is held up as one of the noblest acts. Not because it is easy, but precisely because it is hard. It demands more of us than most acts of devotion. It asks us to release what has wounded us and trust that by doing so, we are not becoming weaker, but stronger in the ways that truly matter. There's something deeply transformative about the decision to forgive. Pride wants to keep us stuck. Pride tells us that letting go means defeat, that holding a grudge is a form of self-respect. But in truth, pride builds walls around our hearts. It locks us in. It convinces us that being right is more important than being free. Islam invites us to something higher. It teaches that true dignity comes not from pride, but from humility. And humility is what allows us to open the door to forgiveness, not because the other person deserves it, but because we no longer want to carry the weight of what they did. Pride is loud and persistent, but peace is quiet and deep. When we let peace speak louder than pride, healing begins. The moment we choose to forgive, something begins to shift inside us. We are no longer defined by the harm done to us. We are no longer stuck in the moment of the offense. We step out of the past and into the present, and in the present we find power, the power to choose how we feel, the power to reclaim our voice, the power to protect our emotional and spiritual space. Forgiveness is a form of emotional boundaries. It says, "I release this not for you but for me, so that I am no longer tied to the pain you caused, so that I can sleep with a light heart, so that I can pray without bitterness shadowing my soul." Islam teaches us that the one who forgives is elevated, that to forgive is not to lose something, but to gain the favor of the one who sees all. It teaches that the reward of forgiving is not only in this world, but also in the next. And more than that, it shows us that forgiveness is a quality of those who are closest to God. Those who can feel the pain, recognize the injustice, and still say, "I choose mercy," are reflecting a divine attribute. They are embodying compassion in action, and there is nothing more powerful than that. Choosing mercy over resentment does not mean we excuse behavior that is wrong. It does not mean we make ourselves vulnerable to repeated harm. Forgiveness can coexist with accountability. It can live side by side with justice. What it does mean is that we refuse to let resentment rule our hearts. Resentment is a heavy burden. It drains energy. It colors the way we see people. It affects our ability to trust. And over time, it turns us into someone we were never meant to be. Mercy is what softens us. It makes us tender without making us weak. It opens space for understanding, even when we do not excuse what happened. Peace is a fragile thing in a heart that clings to pride. Pride wants to keep score. It wants to win. It wants the last word. But Islam teaches that the best of people are those who let go, who walk away from arguments even when they are right. That walking away is not a sign of defeat. It is a sign of strength, of emotional maturity, of deep spiritual awareness. Because not everything must be confronted, not every wound must be turned into a battle. Some things are best handed over to Allah, who sees what we cannot, who knows what we do not, and who balances the scales more perfectly than we ever could. When we forgive, we begin to see people differently. We start to see the pain behind their actions, the wounds they may be carrying, the ignorance they may be acting from. That doesn't mean we accept harmful behavior. But it does mean we understand that not everyone is acting from a place of clarity. Many are acting from their own unresolved pain, and in that understanding, we begin to soften. We begin to feel compassion, not just for them, but for ourselves. For the parts of us that held on so tightly to the hurt, hoping it would bring some kind of justice. For the parts of us that are tired of carrying a burden we were never meant to carry forever. There is something incredibly healing about choosing peace. About saying, I will not let this continue to live inside me. About opening the door and letting resentment walk out, not because it asked for forgiveness, but because you are ready to live without it. That moment of release is sacred. It's between you and God. No one else needs to understand it. No one else needs to approve of it. It is an act of emotional clarity and spiritual liberation. It is saying, I am ready to make space for love again, for trust, for peace, and I will not let the past block that any longer. Forgiveness is not a single decision, it is often a daily practice. Some days the pain comes back. The memory surfaces, the old anger rises, and in those moments we get to choose again. We get to remind ourselves why we let go. We get to reaffirm that mercy is a choice we make not once, but over and over again. Not for the one who hurt us, but for the one we are becoming. Because every time we choose mercy over pride, we become lighter, we become clearer, we become more aligned with the values we hold dear. And that alignment is what Islam calls us to live in harmony with the qualities of our Creator, to reflect His mercy, to embody His compassion, to forgive as we hope to be forgiven, to walk through life with hearts that are strong enough to be soft. That strength is rare. It is not flashy or loud. It is quiet and powerful. It is the strength of someone who knows who they are, who knows what matters, and who refuses to let pain shape their identity. That is the strength of forgiveness. When you forgive, you are not erasing what happened. You are choosing what happens next. You are choosing to write a new chapter, one where you are not held captive by anger. One where your faith is louder than your pride, one where your peace is more valuable than your need to be right. That is not weakness, that is one of the strongest choices you will ever make. True forgiveness begins with a quiet, almost invisible act of trust. Not trust in the one who hurt us, not even trust in the outcome, but trust in ourselves. Trust that we are capable of letting go. Trust that our hearts will not shatter when we release the grip we have on the pain. Trust that healing is possible even after the deepest of wounds. And in Islam, this trust is nurtured by the unshakable belief that our hearts are never alone in their pain. That the one who created us, who knows us more intimately than we know ourselves, is fully aware of what we carry and fully able to mend it. Letting go of resentment and choosing to forgive requires the kind of strength that comes from vulnerability. It is not about being okay or unaffected. It is about being honest with the fact that we were hurt and still deciding that we will not let that hurt define our story. There is immense power in that kind of softness. A power that many mistake for weakness, but only those who have truly sat with their pain, who have faced the ache without numbing or denying it, know what it means to come through the other side with grace. That process begins with trusting that our hearts will not be left broken in the hands of the divine. There are moments in life where pain feels like it will last forever, where the betrayal of someone's actions echoes through everything we do. We wake up with it, we fall asleep with it, we carry it into our conversations, our work, our prayers. It becomes part of the background noise of our lives, and yet Islam teaches us that we are never meant to live this way. That our hearts were created to feel deeply, yes, but also to heal deeply. That our capacity for forgiveness is not dependent on the apology we receive, but on the strength we develop through faith. Forgiveness is not a favor to the offender. It is a declaration that we believe in something bigger than our pain. There's a sacred kind of clarity that arrives when we start trusting that our hearts are resilient. That even when we've been wronged, even when the apology never comes, we can still reclaim our peace. Forgiveness does not ask us to be okay with what happened. It asks us to be okay with moving forward anyway. That shift is everything, because pain left unchecked turns into a cycle of defensiveness, of blame, of keeping people at a distance. But when we start trusting that we can let go and still be whole, that we can release and still be strong, the cycle begins to break. There is a quiet conversation that happens inside the heart of someone who is healing. It goes something like, I don't want to carry this anymore, but I'm afraid of what it means to let it go. And the heart, if we listen closely, responds with, you are more than what happened to you, you are more than this pain. That conversation is where forgiveness begins. Not in dramatic declarations or public closure, but in the stillness of a heart that wants to be free. Islam nurtures this conversation by constantly reminding us that the one who knows our hearts has promised us relief after hardship, light after darkness, and healing after hurt. This is not a passive process. It takes work, it takes prayer, it takes reminding ourselves, often daily, that we are not being weak by letting go, that we are not losing a part of ourselves, that we are not opening ourselves to harm again. We are simply choosing to release what was never meant to define our identity. Resentment, no matter how justified it may feel, is a burden. It keeps us tied to the worst moment. And trust in our ability to heal, in Allah's justice, in the wisdom of moving on, is the only thing that gives us the courage to cut that tie. Forgiveness does not always come all at once. Sometimes it arrives in layers. Sometimes we think we've let go, only to find a memory that brings the anger back. That doesn't mean we've failed. It means we are human, and in Islam, being human is not a flaw, it's the very condition that makes mercy so beautiful. We are taught that the most beloved of people are not those who never stumble, but those who keep returning to truth, returning to peace, returning to Allah, and forgiveness is part of that return. It is a returning to who we were before the bitterness set in, a returning to the heart that longs to be whole again. When we trust our hearts to do this work, something shifts in the way we interact with the world. We begin to see people not only as what they did, but as complex beings with their own struggles. Again, this doesn't mean we excuse harm or abandon justice. It means we stop letting hurt control our lens. We begin to seek understanding where there was once only judgment. We begin to recognize our own capacity for mistakes and how much we depend on the forgiveness of others and of God. That recognition humbles us. It softens us, it brings us closer to the person we want to be. Sometimes forgiveness is not even about another person. Sometimes it's about ourselves, about trusting that we can be forgiven, about believing that we are worthy of beginning again, about releasing the guilt that has weighed on our hearts for too long. Islam is a faith rooted in mercy. It reminds us again and again that no matter how far we've gone, we are only ever one sincere moment away from being wrapped in the mercy of the most forgiving. And when we start to truly believe that, we learn how to extend that same forgiveness to ourselves. Forgiveness becomes an act of faith, faith that letting go will not leave us empty, faith that what is coming is better than what has been. Faith that the heart is capable of healing even if we can't see the path just yet. Every act of forgiveness is an act of courage, a choice to trust the unseen over the pain that is so familiar, and that trust begins to change us. It gives us permission to open up again, to love again, to hope again, because the heart was not created to live in fear. It was created to live in light. The beauty of trusting our hearts to forgive is that we begin to experience life differently. We stop bracing ourselves for the next disappointment. We start welcoming moments of joy without suspicion. We learn that peace is not something we find, it's something we create by what we choose to let go of. And every time we choose to forgive, we are choosing to build that peace from within. Not because life is perfect, but because we trust that we are being guided by something greater than our pain. That kind of trust is not loud. It doesn't announce itself. It shows up in the way we smile more easily, the way we speak more gently, the way we sleep more peacefully. It shows up in our prayers, in our stillness, in our ability to be present again. That is the quiet miracle of forgiveness, and it all begins with trust. Trust that our hearts were made to heal. Trust that Allah never burdens a soul beyond what it can bear. And trust that when we choose to let go, we are never losing, we are returning to who we were always meant to be. In the journey of faith and healing, the most powerful steps we take are often the quietest. Forgiveness is not about changing the past, but about freeing our hearts for the future. It is a choice that reflects strength, not weakness, and a path that leads to peace, not because everything is perfect, but because we are choosing to rise above the pain. When we forgive, we are not only honoring our own growth, we are also embodying the mercy that Islam teaches us to live by every single day. We let go not because they deserve it, but because our soul deserves rest. May we always find the courage to forgive, the wisdom to move forward, and the peace that comes from trusting the one who sees it all.